So I'm going over my food supplies here and herbs and things when I find out that something's been eating my corn seeds right in the house. So they must be mice. I have mouse traps out, but I'm going to preserve these precious gems. I have picked out the best carrot specimens for seed and put them in moistened peat moss. There's a lower layer of beets as well. I'll just make a moist covering for these and put them in cold storage. I've cleared the blight-infected tomatoes, which were all the tomatoes this time, out of the garden. I'll put them in a separate dump site away from the compost pile or the garden. I won't be planting tomatoes along here anymore for a while. 3 years is about max you want to plant your tomatoes because of the blight. So I let my guard down about the fencing, and the seeds for the romaine lettuce and the romaine lettuce seed plants have been eaten away, destroyed. Another lesson in survival. We didn't have any more seeds for this. That would be it. Chamomile is still flowering. There's still some broccoli to pick. There are at least two of these big milk thistles coming still, so we'll see. Maybe we'll get some seed. I'm not sure now. The Brussels sprouts are starting to spring into action. Thank goodness all this kale will wait through the cold and frosty nights until I get around to making my kale chips. Delicious. Those few plants of peas that went in very late, just as an experiment, are actually starting to produce a pea or peas. I had planted carrots later on too, so looks like I've got a few young carrots here also. See, between the chicken that's roaming and probably got over this fence and me going over these low areas, I think finally the groundhogs got the idea and went over as well. So yes, you need to be pretty vigilant about your fencing. And here's the other milk thistle. But here I've noticed we're starting to come out with a fall with all this catnip, which is an excellent gift for someone who has cats. And also this plant here, I think it's called vervain. I planted one, but I think I planted one a long time ago, but I think this might grow locally wild as well. So I decided to make this a herb garden next year where self-seeding herbs and perennial herbs can grow. See how the milk thistle does self-seed and comes up, and you can either choose to keep it or not throughout the garden. Here's a new shoot for the early raspberry bush. I see that it's broken over here, but what can we do? I'll be propagating these because they were successful this year. And here are the late raspberries, and it looks like they're successful here into October. I'm going to propagate these. And also these are the mid-season strawberries or raspberries that actually were successful this year, and I will propagate those to have raspberries all year during the growing season. Raspberries like a good mulch. I decided to use this shady edge of the garden for the raspberries, and I'll start 3 rows along this already mulched area. New shoots will come up beside these raspberry plants, and these can be taken and transplanted pretty much any time of the year. I think I will go for the spring planting. Similarly, these strawberries will propagate, send out a shoot, and form a new plant. I will be transplanting them into their new area in the spring, once a good manuring is done to their patch, their new patch. I'll start the strawberries at this end of the shady side of the garden and gradually go that way. I'm planning and considering the rotation of my garden. This year potatoes were in that far bed. Next year the potatoes will be in this length of bed. So I'm taking that potato section all the way to this fence. So I'll have a nice big 10-foot wide section for potatoes. I won't take them as far as where the tomatoes were because the potatoes are subject to the same blight as tomatoes. So I'll leave that end space open. The miscellaneous crops will be in this bed next year, right after the roots. And I'll be able to use the entire length of this bed for miscellaneous, like eggplants and zucchini and a number of interesting things I'll be planting in this bed as part of the rotation next year. This brassica section of the rotation will be moving over to the next bed next year. However, this year I'm going to block that comfrey that's become a nuisance in the middle of the garden with some black plastic and see if I can kill it by covering it over this sort of middle section of the rotation bed with black plastic to kill that comfrey down. It might take 1 year, might take 2 years, I don't know yet. But that'll leave this 10-foot wide bed a little less space than it would normally. Any root crops that I want to plant for next year will move from this bed as a rotation, and I'll be planting them in this bed. The brassica, again, will move over to the bean bed, or the bean section, peas and beans section of the rotation. And the peas and beans will follow where the potatoes are here next year. So it's good to have a plan for the next year. And here's where the raspberries are going in, 3 rows to keep being propagated along here. Here's where the strawberries are going in this section, just a short section here. This I'm going to put garlic, salsify, carrot, beet, the plastic over the comfrey, parsnips, onions, turnips, just the general idea. Parsley, miscellaneous kind of zucchini, cucumber, maybe corn and squash up here. Potatoes all along here, because I found that I'll need at least 4 times the potatoes I planted this year to feed 2 for a year. And the peas and beans here. And I'm leaving this little section out so that the potatoes won't get the tomato blight. So all in all, the tomatoes will be going along this edge of the garden next year. So there we have it, getting planned for next year. It's good to have your overall next year's garden plan done at this point because the garlic will be going in this fall pretty soon. The strawberries and the potato bed will need to be a good manuring, or other areas will need manuring, and this raspberry bed will need some preparation. So if you plan ahead, then you know when to do what, where. If you're going to put lime on your brassica bed, it's a good idea to do that in the fall too, because it'll incorporate into the soil by the spring when you want to put some manure. And apparently you shouldn't put manure and lime at the same time. One person can handle this size of garden, and this size of garden can feed pretty much one person. So there might be times when you want to get some help if you have help eating it. I dried a lot of tomatoes and ate a lot of fresh tomatoes. Now if I had any green tomatoes left, I would wrap them in paper individually and put them in a drawer or a box. And some of them would ripen up and some of them would go bad, so you have to keep your eye on that kind of thing. I didn't get a chance to can any tomatoes this year because there weren't enough good ones all at the same time. It was mostly because of the blight. I ate about 9 tomatoes fresh, or 4.5 pounds, and figured about 15 pounds for the dried tomatoes. 25 to 30 tomatoes has made this amount of dried tomatoes, which is 1/2 a pound. So about 25 to 30 pound went to 1/2 a pound of tomatoes. From 14¼ pounds of apples, we got just over 1 pound of dried apples. Some of the tomatoes will actually turn black like this. Those, you just throw them out. But most turn out all right. Actually, these are some that I didn't count when earlier telling you how much I got of dried tomatoes from the ripe tomatoes. I added that extra bag of tomatoes, and so the grand total for this year for about 25 tomatoes, or 15 pounds of tomatoes, has dried down to 1 pound of dried tomatoes.